Hey there! If you're getting ready for the Canadian citizenship test, or you just want to understand how your new home works, you've come to the right place. We're going to build a really simple, clear picture of how Canada's government is put together, and we'll focus only on what you really need to know. Okay, let's just jump right in. The big question is, how does this whole system actually fit together? You hear about the king, the prime minister, parliament. It can feel like a lot to take in. But I promise, by the end of this, you'll see it's a pretty logical system, and we will pinpoint exactly what you need to remember for that test. So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the government's basic blueprint. Then we'll build the main structure, which is Parliament. After that, we'll get to know the leaders who actually run the show, and we'll look at the democratic engine that makes it all work. Then we'll see how power is shared and kept in check, and finally, we'll do a quick review of the most important stuff for your test.
All right, first things first, the foundation. Everything else about Canadian government is built on just 3 core ideas. If you can really get what's on this next slide, you are already halfway there.
Okay, this right here, this is huge. It's the absolute foundation of the entire system and a major concept for the test. So think of Canada's government like a 3-in-1 deal. First, it's a constitutional monarchy. That tells us who our formal head of state is. Second, it's a parliamentary democracy. That explains how we pick our leaders. And third, it's a federal state, which is all about how power is divided up across the country. Let's dig into that first piece right now.
So what on earth does constitutional monarchy actually mean? This is a really vital concept. It means that the king is our official head of state, but, and this is the most important part, his power is strictly limited by the Constitution. You could say he reigns, but he doesn't rule. The real power to make decisions every day belongs to the people we elect. It's a really clear separation between the symbolic head and the actual political leadership.
Okay, so we've got our foundation laid. Now let's start building the main structure right on top of it, Parliament. This is really the heart of Canada's government. It's the part that actually makes all the laws.
Now, this is another one you absolutely have to know for the exam. Parliament isn't just one single group. It's actually a team of 3. You've got the sovereign, that's the king, who is represented here in Canada by the Governor-General. Then you have the 2 chambers, or houses, the appointed Senate and the elected House of Commons. For any idea to become a law, it has to get a thumbs up from all 3 parts.
All right, let's put these 2 side by side, because telling them apart is super important. The House of Commons, that's where you come in. You, the voter, elect your local member of parliament, or MP, to go here and represent you. This is the chamber with the real power. It's the one that decides if the government gets to stay in power. The Senate, on the other hand, is appointed. Its members aren't elected. Their job is to give a sober second thought, basically to carefully review and study the laws passed by the Commons, often looking at them from a regional point of view.
So you might be thinking, hang on, if Canada is a democracy, why is one part of Parliament not even elected? And that is a great question. The original idea behind an appointed Senate was to have a group of people who were a bit removed from the day-to-day pressures of politics and getting reelected. This way, they could take a longer-term view on laws without worrying about what's popular at the moment. Now, the Senate's role is definitely debated today, but that core purpose of being a place for sober second thought is still there.
So we have the structure, Parliament. But who are the operators? Who's actually running the show, day to day? Let's meet the key people.
Okay, listen up, because this is probably one of the most important distinctions you need to nail down for the test. Canada basically has 2 different heads. The head of state is the king, who is the formal, symbolic head of the whole country. But the head of government is the prime minister. The PM is the one with the real day-to-day political power. They lead the party in charge, they set the country's direction, and they answer directly to the elected House of Commons. Just remember, one is the symbol, the other is the political leader.
So if the king isn't physically in Canada, who does his job? Well, that's the Governor-General. They're the king's representative here, and they handle all the formal duties, like giving royal assent to make a bill into a law, or formally appointing the prime minister. But, and this is the most important part, you really got to get this, the Governor-General almost always performs these duties on the advice of the elected prime minister. It's a powerful tradition that ensures the real control always stays with the government that the people chose.
Now, the Prime Minister isn't doing all of this alone. Of course, they pick a team of people, usually other members of Parliament, to become cabinet ministers. Each minister gets put in charge of a big government department, like finance or health or defense. And together, the Prime Minister and this cabinet form what we call the executive branch. In fact, when you hear people talking about the government, this is usually who they mean. the team that proposes laws and runs the country.
All right, we've got the building and we've got the operators. Now let's talk about the engine that makes the whole thing go. This next idea is the absolute heart of Canadian democracy. It's called responsible government.
Responsible government sounds kind of complicated, but it's actually a pretty simple and really powerful idea. It just means that the government, so the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, can only stay in power as long as it has the support, or the confidence, of a majority of the elected MPs in the House of Commons. So, if the government loses a big vote on something important, like the national budget, it's considered to have lost confidence. When that happens, the Prime Minister has only two choices: resign or call a brand new election. It's the key mechanism that keeps the government accountable to the people's representatives.
So how easy is it for a government to keep that confidence? Well, that totally depends on the election results. If the ruling party wins more than half of all the seats in the House of Commons, they have a majority government. They can usually pass their laws pretty easily. But if they win the most seats, but it's still less than half of the total, it's a minority government. In that case, to pass any laws and stay in power, they have to constantly negotiate with other parties to get their support. This usually means minority governments are a bit less stable, but sometimes they can be more collaborative too.
So, how do we make sure all this power doesn't just get concentrated in one place? Well, the system has some built-in checks and balances. Power in Canada isn't just in Ottawa. It's carefully divided between different levels of government, which we call federalism, and the whole thing is watched over by independent courts.
Right. As we said, Canada is a federal state, which is just a fancy way of saying that power is split up. As you can see here, the federal government handles the big picture stuff for the whole country, like national defense or printing money. The provincial governments look after more regional things that affect you more directly, like education and healthcare. And finally, your municipal or local government takes care of your day-to-day community stuff, like firefighting and garbage collection. This division of powers is a really core feature of Canada.
So who's the referee here? Who makes sure every level of government stays in its own lane and plays by the rules? Well, that's the job of the courts, the judicial branch. Led by the Supreme Court of Canada, their role is to interpret the laws and the Constitution and make sure that no government, federal or provincial, steps over the line. They provide a really crucial, independent check on political power.
Okay, we have covered a ton of ground. We've basically built the whole model of Canadian government. Now let's do a super quick review to lock in the absolute must-knows for your test.
These are the concepts that can trip people up, so let's nail them down one more time. Remember, head of state is symbolic, head of government is political. Parliament is the entire lawmaking body, while the government is the PM and cabinet who lead it. The House of Commons is elected and holds the power, the Senate is appointed to review things. And federal powers are national, while provincial powers are more local and social.
Okay, if you're hitting the books tonight, I want you to pay extra attention to the ideas covered in these key sections. They really are the absolute core of the whole system. The type of government we have, the three parts of parliament, the two different heads, that crucial idea of responsible government, and the three levels of government. If you can master these, you're going to be in great shape.
So if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, here's a super simple way to picture the whole thing. Think of it like a house. The crown, the king and governor general, is like the symbolic roof, providing the overall structure. Parliament and the provincial legislatures are the rooms inside, where all the daily work of debating and lawmaking happens. And finally, the courts are the strong supports in the foundation, making sure the whole building stands strong and follows the rules of the Constitution.
And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. We've seen all the pieces: the crown, parliament, the cabinet, the courts. But which of these parts do you think is the most important for making sure the government is ultimately accountable to you, the citizen? It's a great question to reflect on, because the answer really gets to the very heart of what Canadian democracy is all about.